Hello, and welcome to The Y Word, the podcast that gets under the skin of entrepreneurs, business people, and basically anyone who makes things happen, to ask why they do what they do. My name's Ian Hawkins, and in this episode, you'll hear...
Women run PTAs, women run all these things at schools, right? But I was on the PTA once. It didn't work out really well for me because you can't fire anybody. In trying to understand the technology, I believe is what has given us a slower paced innovation. I don't think there's going to be a person that's going to come out of COVID without some kind of mental health issue.
Today, I'm talking to Pamela Pecs Cytron. Pamela is founder and CEO of Pendo Systems, which brings innovative technology solutions to financial institutions, which is a sector undergoing massive change. Pam, welcome to The Y Word.
Good morning, Ian. How are you?
Unbelievably well. I've got to hold you to something that you say on your bio, which is that you say you use your knowledge as a base, not a box. And I just wondered what that meant.
So we tend as entrepreneurs to get into our box, and we have our objectives and our single sales objectives. But I think as an entrepreneur, to grow, to explore, to pivot, to explore all those things that we go through, it's the base of the life all the way through of the lessons that you've learned that you can't ignore. So I try to make sure that you're using all those experiences and the interactions and those types of things that we've grown, that have grown with us to apply to that, to allow ourselves not to get too into ourselves, if that makes any sense to you.
It does. And we're going to come back to some of that later, some of those experiences. But I just wondered, what does Pendo Systems, what do they actually do for clients?
Well, Pendo focuses on finding what I like to refer to as the alternative data, right? Data is a big word. Data is the mining. Data is the gold. We have all the statistics around it, right? But we tend to leave behind the insights that are not easily expressible. And that might mean we look at keywords, or we look at sentences, or if we know what we're looking for, we can find it. We attempt to look for the things that we're not looking for and find the details, the patterns, the insights into the data that can be surfaced to combine with the data that's so obvious, right? I hate to throw in a political example, but in our last election here, all data would have pointed to a different outcome, but the outcome of the election was quite different than anyone expected. And that was based on the fact that the data that they were looking for was the obvious data that we had always used. And if you went back and you looked at the alternative data and the alternative facts and those types of information, you may have found a different outcome.
Okay, so I get that, but how would that translate across into a banking world?
So if we think about the banking infrastructure, it's mature, it's legacy, and we take information and we put that into those systems. But as we found, for instance, in the last financial crisis, and I assume we've got a lot of issues in front of us, the questions that were being asked of the institutions were not readily available in those systems of record. So where were they going? They were going back to the documents, reading documents to find phrases and terms and conditions. Big topic on Wall Street right now, the LIBOR, right? Which continues to plow through during these unprecedented times that we're all living in. But people are going in and looking at patterns for LIBOR by searching for LIBOR. But we've found patterns, and we found in our data, information that would impact LIBOR remediation in paragraphs that don't even say the word LIBOR. So it's the patterns of the words, it's the sentence structure, it's the unimplied consequences of a sentence, of being able to extract that detail out of a sentence and then be able to interpret that and compare that into that data.
So you're using things like process mining and AI as well, yeah?
Well, I think AI is a big word, and I think AI is a shiny object. And if you think about what Pendo or technologies like Pendo do, it's the precursor to an AI. It's the workhorse of data. We're going in, just like when you're going into a oil field and you're mining the data, the commerce and the business that comes out of that is based on mining that information. So we're going back into mining the data out of these documents using natural language, using a deterministics approach, using machine learning. So the AI capabilities become a byproduct, but they're not functional if you don't have the reliable, accurate data.
When you talk, I'm thinking about all this technology that you're bringing in and talk about machine learning. But Pendo's been around for 15 years. What was it like on day one when this technology wasn't quite as mature?
Pendo's creation 15 years ago came out of a back office system. It was basically looking at how you would commoditize the back office, regardless of whatever line of business you were in, whatever geography you were in, right? We didn't look at Wall Street as having inventory outside of a trading book. And the inventory is the positions, right? I wasn't wise enough 15 years ago, but we transitioned as a result of the financial crisis because what came to light was those back office systems were not as reliable. And certainly there should have been a transformation, but the requirements for the alternative data, the requirements for the answers trumped, if you will, the need to replace that. So that legacy infrastructure didn't change. So we made a pivot of saying what needed to happen, right? And so I started looking at the unstructured data capabilities back in 2013 and transitioned into a new product in 2015. So our journey of unstructured data really started in 2013, carrying forward.
And what is it that, I'm a bank customer, the people listening to this are bank customers. What is it that you're doing for banks that's going to impact the customer at the end of the day?
Speed, safety, and security. At what point in time could you in one day get a call from your bank and say, don't fax me your documents, but send them to me through email? I mean, you couldn't even get a bank person's email address. What I'm talking about when I say speed, the ability to transact, get the document to the institution, but know that you can extract the details and the data out of that. And why I say safety and security is that the safety and the security is not from cyber, if you will. It's from saying that we now are taking the data from the source, the lowest common denominator, and I say the single source of the truth is a document, right? So if you're able to then in real time ingest those documents and pull out the key insights, right? They're validated, trust but verify, right? So from a bank customer perspective, you're taking data now that's going right from a document into a digital transformation that will flow through. So errors will be reduced. Reliability will go up. The speed of transactions will go up. And basically, the reliability of the data increases.
So as we are plunging into this new financial crash, whatever we're going to call it, do you think then that banks, thanks to technology, are perhaps better placed to deal with it?
I don't think they're better placed to deal with it right now, but I think that we've been forced into a digital revolution that was going too slow. We always look for the catalyst, but we got forced into digitalization. I heard a story, I won't say the bank's name, right? But all of a sudden everyone was at home. Everything crashed. They all of a sudden they all got Zoom and they all got this, right? So they went to having half the people work one week and half the people work another week. We can't look at what, the problems that we have. We have to look at what the opportunities beyond this are. And this forced into a digital world, albeit not completely prepared, will accelerate the innovation that needs to happen. And I think if we've discovered anything in this process, supply chain is interconnected. It from banking to insurance to all these different places. So if you think about knowing a customer, we talk about KYC, we talk about client onboarding, right? Regardless of the 360-degree view of a client, you set up a bank account at a bank or you get a loan at a bank. The amount of documentation that you are filling out is stacks and stacks of paper. In less than 4 weeks, how many millions of loans have we opened up for people that went through a non-traditional process? One loan document, a single underwriting process. It was forced into it from that speed perspective. Now that data all sits in there. And so we were able to demonstrate that we could onboard a customer with a single set of documents and qualify them and disperse money and get a loan out to them in a traditional process that would have taken 3 to 6 months. And we've done that 3 to 6 days.
So that's the speed of digital, that how that really ramps up and accelerates the speed at which banks are able to work.
Now, I'm not suggesting that the underwriting process was completely processing. We're not going to have some, risk out of the speed of these loans. But I certainly think that what we've demonstrated in this use case, which was a requirement, is that it can be done. And now being able to take that information, extract those terms and conditions. If you take the PPP loans as an example in the United States, if the banks now went in and said, maybe my underwriting process wasn't as thorough as it used to be, they can go in very quickly, extract terms and conditions out of those documents quite quickly with technology like ours, and be able to now create risk models to say, get in front of where it might fall out. We weren't over encumbered by worrying about the risk and the compliance and the failure. We just did it. So now we can extract those details and proactively measure the risk of what this fallout might be in advance of the crash.
You're a very technologically savvy person, and you've built your career and your business on technology. Are the people you're selling it to, are they getting more technologically savvy? Are they understanding the nuts and bolts of it more? Or do they just see it as a tool and you know how to use it?
They don't need to understand the technology. They need to understand the byproduct of the technology. And trying to understand the technology, I believe, is what has given us a slower pace to innovation. The interpretation and worrying about under the covers and worrying. Now, I'm not saying that the structure of the technology, the reliability of the technology on that part. Allow the technology companies to build the technology and allow the institutions to take advantage of the byproduct of that. And that's entrepreneurs and smaller companies like mine, and that's larger companies, in the technology space. But we sell into a business user. And so what you have to be able to do is you have to be able to explain the technology in a way that a business person can understand what the value and the byproduct of what they can get from that technology is. And whether I'm talking about machine learning, or whether I'm talking about artificial intelligence, or I'm talking about supervised learning, all the buzzwords become more confusing to then putting the value proposition around what the byproduct of the benefit to the business is. And when we see the byproducts, the benefit for the business, that's how we can excel technology.
There are a couple of reasons why I wanted Pam on the Y Word. And first of all, it's because anybody that's had to get a loan or a mortgage or some other service from the bank, when that goes through easily, Pam's company is one of the ones that helps that happen. The other reason is because you ask her a question, she'll give you a straight answer, which is great. I didn't expect her to give me such an honest answer when I asked her about how people were going to come out of COVID and the coronavirus lockdown and how people were coping. Look, let me just play the next bit of the interview. You'll hear what I mean.
I do a tremendous amount of work in mental health. I'm the chairman of the Global Recovery Initiative, which is based here in DC. And you've got big, powerful people, and you've got movie stars, and all this type of stuff. But the stigma associated with it has been that in the statistics of this mental health issue, I don't think there's going to be a person that's going to come out of COVID without some kind of mental health issue, right? And yeah. I think that there's going to be a huge transformation in that area. All of these people are hitting the web asking questions to Google. Where do I go for help, right? And when you do that, it's fascinating because the only thing that comes up are like rehab centers. Rehabs control the market. AdWords control the market. And you have all these people searching for help. But the startup world in mental health, to give you an example, $52 billion invested in fintech last year. $750 million with an M invested in mental health startups. It's impacting so many. Right? Think about the opiate crisis, right? And now people are on the phone and they're facing anxiety and they're calling up their doctor and they can't go to the doctor and they can't go to the therapist. So they're supplying them anxiety medicines, and anxiety medicines are an opiate, right? I mean, people keep joking, we're going to come out drunk and fat. It's not a joke.
Pam, you're in the top 25 New Jersey women entrepreneurs. And I just wondered how relevant the word women is in that.
I think there's many advantages to having recognition for being a woman entrepreneur. You need to use that to an advantage, but not abuse that privilege. And we're in a very complex time with diversity in general. And so diversity is very important, but I think it's some of the characteristics that women have naturally for differences of distinctions in terms of, some of the different way of problem solving, some of the different way of multitasking. I saw a report recently where the countries that are, setting themselves aside in the COVID world are run by women, right? That doesn't make all women better, but I think it comes down to different ways of collaborating, different ways of nurturing, different ways of just distinctly characteristics that we have. We use the advantages that we have of women, but we shouldn't abuse the privilege of trying to say that we're in a class that is not getting proper attention.
Maybe the reason the women-run countries are doing better is because women have to be better to get to that level of leadership in the first place.
You do, and you know what? The way you get there is much more progressive, right? You do a lot of things. I mean, my first job was receptionist, right, in a tech company, right? And then I went into telemarketing, and then I went into sales. So I've done every job almost in a tech company, right? So that ability to progress your career, I think it's a great point, Ian, that you make, that you take the journey of knowing, in not all cases, but in many cases, the evolution of what that job is, the people, the places, the things, the nuances. I think that can be a contributor.
I mean, you talk about your time working your way up and doing telemarketing and sales, and about your time on Wall Street. But what was it that made you want to set up and be your own boss?
The biggest motivator to me starting it was being in big organizations who had grown and lost sight of the client. One of the last conversations I had with a leader in an organization was, Pam, you forget who you work for. To which I replied, no, I think you forget who we work for.
Okay.
Didn't end well, by the way. But, you get big and you lose sight of listening to the customer. And I got into the world where we were using fear of conversion as a client retention tactic. And we still have that. And so to me, it was making sure, because the biggest sales trait of a salesperson is the ability to listen. Not hear, but listen. We stopped listening. And so for innovation to happen in that, and so I wanted to make sure that we were looking at a way that we could always value the customer, and we never got too big, that we were engaged with them in a sense that we weren't taking them for advantage. So it had a lot to do with the client experience. And I wanted to build something that fundamentally we could deliver, but that we could be looking at what they needed versus what we thought they wanted.
And talking about what people want, when you said earlier about that you changed and you started using machine learning from about 2015, I think you said it was.
Correct.
Was it difficult to make that change? Was it an evolution? Was it a revolution?
It was an evolution. We lived in this world. I mean, I grew up in the back office. My name, when it was, politically correct to be able to say it, they used to call me the back office broad, which I wore with honor, right? But, why were people not changing their systems? Why? And it was too hard because they were trying to do these system to system conversions. And if you're in the back office, that's never going to reconcile. And so the evolution was, how do you mitigate this implementation risk to get them on a new journey? And so the idea was, if I could actually go back to the original document and just go from scratch instead of trying to go from one system to another system, we might solve the conversion problem that we all experience. And then as I got into it, it was actually a bank that said, Pam, what do you care about the back office? Your ability to take this data and digitize it and move it isn't specific to the back office. It's specific to anything, right? So that's why I call it a revolution, because it was a byproduct to say, I want to be able to sell this and make it easier. But once I got to that destination, it opened up a whole new world of opportunity to be able to look at data in a different way.
So your journey has been one of gradual change and then really big change. Are you comfortable with change?
Change happens. I have experienced severe medical issues. I've gone through all kinds of things, right? So, change is, just part of life. And, you get curveballs thrown to you, you get things happening. And so if you can't adjust to that change and figure out, and, it's about living in the solution, not living in the problem.
Do you think that any business that wants to succeed has to be agile?
But define agile. Agile means the ability, right, in my opinion, to change. But agility is progression. Agility is, it comes back to listening, right? To be agile, you need to be able to change. You need to be able to adapt, right? But that becomes very challenging in technology because, with all the open source and with all the different technologies, right? You actually have to lay a plan as an entrepreneur. You have to choose your technology partners. You have to choose your technology, whether you're going to go C++ or Java, for instance, right? But, some new technology, some new language will come out before you've ever finished your project or, in that first phase. So you have to be agile in delivery and speed and incremental delivery, but you can't be too agile that you're going to go with the next shiny objects that are going to come. And so it's a balance. So agility to me is balance.
Sure. And that idea of balance and the ability to change and the ability to adapt and form partnerships, do you think that women are particularly good at that?
I do. But I got to tell you, think about women run PTAs, women run all these things at schools, right? But I was on the PTA once. It didn't work out really well for me because you can't fire anybody. But I do think that they, as a natural course, and, and not trying to get into this, female versus male things, but, you do more things at the same time. There is that multitasking. And so, and you listen, you've got more than 2 ears, you've got 4 ears, right? So you have conversations going on. And I think a great podcast for you or a great, research project that someone can do out of this, right? After COVID, right, is all the working moms that wound up staying home, right? And managing those things. You see the kids coming to pass that, right? But, moms that worked, as professionals every day outside of that had met, and my kids are grown now, but, had caregivers, had ways of how they managed the household during the day and how they managed the work during the day. But on the weekends and the nights, they were managing the household, right? So I'm really interested to hear how the blending of those two things, being at home at the same time, what the outcome of how women dealt with that is after COVID.
I think that's going to be somebody's PhD project, and it's going to work really well. Pam, it's been great talking to you. My last question for you is the dinner party game. So you can have anybody you like for a dinner party, but the twist is it's not dinner, it's a business lunch. You can go for a business lunch with anybody. They can be alive, they can be dead, they can be fictional, absolutely anybody you like. Who would you go on a lunch with that would be able to, take your career or your business to another level?
I think I would say Warren Buffett.
Why Warren Buffett?
One, he's humble, right? And I'll tell you something. I have written to Warren Buffett over the years. I have this file. It's called Letters to Important People, and I think I've written to Warren Buffett 20 times. And even on that 20th time, his EA would write me back, and say, respectfully, Mr. Buffett's not going to call you back.
Sure.
Right? But I would love to understand how someone with such influence, with such power, with such intelligence has managed his life in such a humble way, in an unmaterialistic way. I know people in Nebraska who know him, and he still goes to the same place every morning for breakfast, and he still lives in a very modest home with very modest cars, right? And I think we all, as entrepreneurs, strive for the day, right? So I think he's the polar opposite to an Elon Musk, right? And so to me, it would be about, not his overarching success, but how, when he was so privileged along the way, did he balance his life in such a way, and did that give him a greater amount of pleasure than other people?
And I also have to ask, who's the best person that's responded to one of your letters?
Ginny Romney from IBM.
Oh, that's cool.
And not once, but 3 times with a personalized letter of stationery, which I have on my wall.
Pamela Pecs Cytron, thank you so much indeed for your time today. It's been absolutely great talking to you, and as ever, I've learned a huge amount.
Thank you for having me.
So thanks to Pamela Pecs Cytron. If you'd like to find out more about today's guest, you'll find links in the show notes. That's where you'll also find the Y Word contact details if you know of a great guest waiting to join us on the show. From me, Ian Hawkins, have a great time. Till next time.